everyone, Egman here with another video, and we've got another episode of Good, Bad, or Broken, but this time I'm in the hot seat because it is Hearthstone, a game I haven't played in over 3 years, and we have Ridiculous Hat back again to now be kind of the anchor for these cards, and once again, me be the guest for them.
Hey, thanks so much for having me back, Eggman. It's you nerd sniped me
Yeah.
because ever since we did the Digimon episode
Yeah.
of what would it be like evaluating cards if you know card games but you don't know this game, and you had mentioned you hadn't played Hearthstone in a while. It's now you said 3 years. It was like Witchwood, right?
Yeah, that's the... What was the one? Okay, I remember it was shortly after Ben Brode leaving. And then
Yes.
I think Witchwood was the last one. I bought 50 packs and then I opened them. I'm like, I don't want to play this game. So that's like,
Shutterwalk, I think, was around. Gen and
yes.
Baku were around.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was Witchwood. 4 years.
Okay.
That
Okay.
was April 2018.
Okay. Yeah.
So that was 2 years pre-COVID.
Yes. Yeah. So a long time.
Been a while.
Yes. I know personally. Yeah. A lot of staff has changed. A lot of, I think we've talked a little bit, a lot of kind of the ideal, what the card balance is. A lot of these things have changed since then.
Yeah, the philosophy is very different. Hearthstone is a digital game, so
Hmm.
Digimon it's a game about digital monsters, but it's a paper game.
Yeah.
If a card needs to be changed, they can reduce the numbers that you can play, but they can't change the cards.
Hmm.
Hearthstone is lucky enough that they can change the card's actual stats and function, whatever. So
Hmm.
the cards that we're going to include in this list today, there are 7 total cards,
Yeah.
and you're going to see the version when they were first printed,
Yeah.
or printed, created, released, whatever. But there are if a card could be a broken card, usually we'll see it change. That's how
Hmm.
we know it's broken in Hearthstone. It stops being as good. They make it worse.
Hmm.
A bad card could be buffed or could just stay bad.
Yeah.
Could be either. But they do actually do buffs now routinely.
Hmm.
And then a reasonably good card will just stay the way it was.
Hmm.
It'll just be the same.
Yeah, and that's really wild. And even when I was playing, buffs were not very common. And the idea is that, oh, if you want something like this card to be usable, we'll just digitally print another copy of it, right? So and that's something pretty much what paper games do a lot. And so it is interesting to see that they're going back. You know what? Let's make this card better. Let's let people try it out at the better state and do that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's the developers have talked about it actually. When you're making a new game, you don't want the rules to constantly be changing. But
Hmm.
Hearthstone, the first closed beta was 2013.
Yeah.
It's been, 8.5 years now.
Yeah.
This is a much more mature audience. They don't attract as many new players now. It's a lot of really engaged people that have been around for a while. You
Hmm.
need to keep things interesting for them, which
Yeah.
means more fluidity usually works in your favor. So they change cards once a month now or so. They release mini sets in the middle of expansion with a few more cards to just throw into standard. It's a very different world. And as
Yeah.
we jump into our first card here.
And real quick, yeah. So Hearthstone does have rotation too, which Digimon and
Yes.
DBS do not have, and then also just the fact that, you do say, yeah, these mini sets were not something that were common when I was playing the game. Also, there's a whole new class, Demon Hunter, that I have not played a game with. So I don't, I think it's like it's something like a hunter and like a warlock combined, somewhat. Like I don't even know what the identity of the class is besides those kind of ideas.
So I'm glad you asked, Eggman. The first slide, please,
Okay, all
and
right.
you will see the identity
All right, so
of an iconic Demon Hunter card, Twin Slice. It's a 0 mana spell. Look at that green frame. Oh, it's so green.
yeah,
Give your hero 1 attack this turn. It adds a second slice to your hand, which is identical to this. So
okay,
it's 0 mana, gain 1 attack, and then you get another card that does that.
okay, but
So
it doesn't make a
Demon
copy of
Hunter,
itself, right? It's just,
yeah, it's
okay,
just the second slice doesn't duplicate. You get 2 of these effects
okay,
to split up however you want. And this is kind of what Demon Hunter's about. Demon Hunter is very big on the character attacking on their own, very big about direct damage through attacking. It can deal damage directly to minions with spells that they gain lifesteal spells,
mm-hmm.
which that was in the game when you left. That was introduced in Nice and Frozen Throne, the mechanic
Yes,
of
yeah,
deal damage and gain life equal to that amount. But
yeah,
unless Demon Hunter has a weapon that gains it's a lifesteal weapon, so you can play that. It's got a couple charges. You can throw this on there, gain a little bit extra. or you can use this to hit minions.
Hmm.
But it does damage, but it rarely does so without hitting the opponent face.
Okay, okay. And so maybe what is the hero power? And additionally, all classes only have one hero power by default, right? But there are ways to change your hero power with certain cards. Is that kind of correct still?
Yep, you can. So hero powers can be it's kind of this 2 mana button,
Hmm.
or in the case of Demon Hunter, a 1 mana button. We'll get to that.
Okay. Oh,
That just sits next to the hero, and you can do it. It's you kind of think of Magic the Gathering and Hearthstone and draw a lot of comparisons, but
yeah.
in Magic you have lands and you draw them.
Hmm.
You need the mana, but in Hearthstone you automatically get the mana every turn, so you need something to do when you don't have a card you can play.
Yeah.
It's a hero power. Warlock, pay 2 life, draw a card. Paladin, make a 1/1.
Yeah.
So Demon Hunter is 1 mana, gain 1 attack. That is the hero power. It is
Okay.
the
Okay.
only default 1 mana hero power in the game.
Okay, cool. And so, and this is more just memory coming back. So, and the analog for Dragon Ball Super is like having skills on your leader, right? And just the thing like these are skills that you can do once per turn. You still have to pay mana for it, but it's kind of tied to your leader. And unlike in this game, we have cards that are generic cards, and then there are cards that are locked to specific classes. So, which we kind of have in Dragon Ball Super, where we have cards that are kind of locked to certain colored leaders and that kind of idea. But then also, so looking at this card specifically, so when you swing with your leader, and kind of how battle works is that even if you are the one swinging into something else, you still trade damage numbers, right? So if you have 3 damage or 3 and you're hitting into a 1/3, you as the leader still takes the 1 damage, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's just like weapons in Hearthstone, right? Like it's you remember Fiery War Axe. You throw
Yeah.
a War Axe, you hit something, you still
Hmm.
take the damage
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
So you can have attack on your hero without having a weapon.
Hmm.
Demon Hunter is the first one to really push that, where you get to attack without a weapon giving that to you. There are also some cards in Demon Hunter's base kit, or at least there were when this was printed. Uh, and there are still some every so often
Yeah. Yeah.
where it cares about either how much attack you have when you attack, or if you've attacked this turn.
Hmm.
Like there's a card that says when you attack, summon a 2/2 demon.
Oh,
Another
okay.
one, if you attack this turn, deal 4 damage to a target, something
Okay.
like that.
All right. Now, mechanics aside, looking at this one, it costs 0, which is always suspect, right? Card game players love, it's like hearing non-taxable income, right? If you can do something that's free, you would love to do it. If this was a rogue spell, I think 100% this would be broken. Just the fact that you get 2 spells for essentially free, and it just means that you're enabling combos and that kind of stuff. That sounds kind of good to me. And this really is leaning from good to broken. And I'm guessing also the second slice that you add to your hand, does it just stay in hand? It doesn't go away if you don't use it that turn, or does it? Do you have to use
Yep,
it?
it's a 0 mana card that gives you +1 attack. You can save it for as long as you want. Goes to the right side of your hand. Whatever you want to do.
Man, okay, so definitely. I mean, yeah, for you're doing 2 damage with your leader. As like worst case, you just double cast it, and for 1 card you do 2 damage to something, which for no mana, which is cost efficient for most things that I remember a couple years ago. But is it? I still think it's good to broken range. It costs 0. I'm just gonna say it's broken. I'm gonna say they had to fix this somehow. Final answer.
And the winner is.
Broken. Yeah. Final answer.
Let's click it through.
Oh, sorry. That's right. I have the buttons.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one more click.
And the
right?
reveal is.
All right. Okay. I was correct.
All right. So, and the nerf they did, I'm going to call it a rework. They didn't actually make it that much worse. At 0 mana, this card was crazy.
Okay.
Completely crazy. It was, so Backstab from Rogue. 0 mana, deal 2 damage to an undamaged minion. This had no restriction. You could break it up over multiple turns. It was impossible to develop against. And there's this mechanic called Outcast that Demon Hunter cares about.
Okay.
Because, they're super hot topic-y and all, Outcast. So they care about stuff from the left or right side of your hand. Twin Slice is a 0 mana card, and then the second slice always goes to the far right and always costs 0. So look at Altruist on the screen here. After you play the left or rightmost card in your hand, deal 1 damage to all enemies, you would just go chop, 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 and hit a bunch of stuff. And then you would play Skull on turn 6. That used to cost 5, by the way, and Altruist used to cost 3. Demon Hunter, when they printed it, unbelievably broken.
Yeah.
So you would skull into Altruist Twin Slice, and you would go skull, 0 mana Altruist, slice, shoot, play whatever other card you hit off the skull, and you would deal crazy amounts of damage from hand. So the reworked version is 1 mana plus 2 attack, and you get 2 of those as well.
Mm-hmm.
Still really powerful, like
Yep.
in Wild powerful. It was very good in Standard. It has since rotated out. It was only in Standard for 1 year.
Okay.
The first version crazy broke, and second version still quite good. So yeah, you were correct. 0 mana, hard to say no.
Yeah, and I think when introducing a brand new class or a brand new mechanic, it's normally is the broken thing, or it sees absolutely no play. It's very hard to get that balance between the two, and so I can see all these just being really really aggressive. Like when I was looking at the first card, I'm just like, that's 2 draws off Auctioneer. Like that's how old my thinking is. Like, is Auctioneer still played now? Is it still a viable card? Have we rotated around from it?
It's still in Standard, but you can usually do a lot better than that. Like, people tried it, and there have been times when people have played it. It usually means something else is busted around it.
Sure.
Because it's well, actually, I'm glad you mentioned Auctioneer. We should look at the next card.
Okay, all right. Man, we did not rehearse this at all, but I seem to be asking the right questions. So let's go to this next one.
You are.
All right. Cornelius
Roame.
All right. At the start and end of each player's turn, draw a card. All right. An Auctioneer is a 6. Is it 6 mana or 5 mana right now?
It used to be 5, they nerfed to 6.
Okay.
6 mana, 4/4. Whenever you play a spell, draw a card. So this card is a 6 mana, 4/5 neutral legendary. At the start and end of each player's turn. So at the end of your turn after you play it, you draw a card. And at the start of their turn, you draw a card. And at the end of their turn, you draw a card. And at the start of your next turn, you draw a card. So if you play this and it lives, that's 4.
Yeah, and so just playing it outright, like let's say you play it and I like additionally too. So this uses kind of the mana system where it's not where Digimon, once you go over the number, you pass your turn. You can spend all your mana and then you physically end your turn, right? And so
there's a button. Yep.
Yeah, there's a button. And additionally for this game too, like Digimon, there's very little. There's literally no interaction for Hearthstone. Digimon, there's minimal interaction, I would say. So you kind of know if your guy lives. So essentially 6 mana. This lets you draw 2 cards, guaranteed, right? Because at the end of your turn, you draw 1, and then your opponent goes to their turn, and you draw a second card. So, all right, drawing cards is good. 6 is expensive. It really just kind of goes to how fast the game is. I will say, like, there is ramp in this game. And if you can ramp up to this dude and then you just sit on it, like he draws you, once, as you said before, he draws you a bunch of cards out of nowhere. And normally, when you're using ramp, the trade for ramping stuff is that you lose cards in hand to get up to your higher level, and then after that, you start drawing cards from there. So I think to supplement it, right? So 6. If this was 5 mana, I think I would call this good. Right. 6 mana seems just kind of expensive, and I'm not sure what ramping tools there are existing. And it looks, it is a neutral legendary, but obviously it looks like a paladin card. How good is drawing cards in the game? That is the real question. So this is definitely on the other side. This is on the bad to good side for me.
It's close. This one is hard because it seems like it's pretty contextual, right?
Yeah, and so something that Hearthstone has available to it that I would say physical card games is that there's always kind of like a rules master because it's an online client, right? So because of that, it opens up possibilities for a lot of interesting mechanics, right? So for example, like when you draw cards and you draw a specific card, it shows it automatically. Like you can do some interesting like kind of deck things and everything like that. I'll say, oh man, I'll say he's bad. I'll say card draw seems tempting. I'll say he's either not played enough or they maybe reduced him to a 5 cost to see play, and that is my final answer. So rate it. Do I just go to the next scene then?
Click it through.
Okay. And
He is bad.
Okay.
He is
Whew.
exactly the same, but he is bad. It's
Okay.
yeah, you hit the nail on the head, and the question isn't, "Is card draw good?" Because we know card draw is good.
Yes. Yeah.
Is card draw good? Is this a good deal?
Hmm.
And the answer is no, because either he dies or you die.
Yeah.
Those are your choices. Because it's a 6 mana card that takes up, like, you have to get to the second half of the game.
Hmm.
You have to play something on turn 6 that does not develop board at all. It doesn't protect itself. It doesn't protect anything else. So you just have to play it and hope. And playing something and then saying, "I hope something good will happen,"
Yeah.
is not where you get anywhere in card games. So
Hmm.
you got the correct answer where a lot of dedicated Hearthstone players did not. A lot of people were really hopeful for the idea of either getting this out quickly with some ramp tools like Lightning Bloom, which
Hmm.
is basically it's innervate pre-nerf innovate with overload.
Okay.
You gain
Okay.
2, but you overload for 2.
Okay.
So people had ideas of getting this out, but you want something that's impactful right away that kills some stuff or
Hmm.
that stops you from getting hit in the face.
Yeah.
And this doesn't do any of that. You just draw more cards and then you're overloaded. You have a bunch of cards and you die.
Yeah, and I could
So
see, if it was half the cost, like if it was a 3 mana 2/3, I think maybe then. And the other thing I was just thinking about is that if I know that there's some time, there's cards that exist that say, or maybe exist that I can see, like when you draw it, you cast it immediately. So maybe if there's
yeah,
in a
cast
deck,
when drawn. There are a
okay,
few of those.
okay, so maybe if there are a lot of those in the meta where this represented potentially two spells for free, maybe, but yeah, okay. Well, that
So
was really tricky though.
it is difficult, and also card draw is really good right now, way more efficient than this guy. In this expansion, the expansion that came out, United in Stormwind,
Hmm.
there was a very powerful rogue combo deck that got nerfed. There's a card called Garrote that it deals 2 damage and then shuffles 3 cards into your deck that deal 2 damage when you draw them, cast when drawn, and they're
Okay.
boosted by spell damage. So there was a deck that would draw the entire deck by turn 7 or 8,
Hmm.
shuffle in 6 bleeds, and then draw them right away and kill you for 32 in 1 turn.
Gotcha.
But
Okay.
that did so without any 6 mana cards,
Hmm.
which is
Yes.
so awkward.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, you
Okay.
identified all the problems with this card. Well, I'm impressed. Well
Okay.
done.
Cool. I
Way to
was
golf clap.
I was so close to saying good, but all right. Let's go to this next
Yeah.
one. Okay.
All right. I just want you to read the text.
I have seen this card, but more of I had like I have not done a lot of research, but if I get it right, like I get a half point, and if I get it wrong, I should lose. But uh yeah, so Zephyr the Great, I'll just read it. It's a 2 cost 3/2 elemental, which that's something new for me. I know that no, elemental's not new, but what spells have now like traits?
Spells have tribes now, spell
Tribes.
schools.
Yes,
Yeah.
which is bonkers. Battlecry, if your deck has no duplicates, wish for the perfect card. Now that is once again the only, like, you could not do this, in the same way for a physical card game, right? You can't just like wham, bring out a notepad, draw the card you need, slam it on the table, right? This is looks like Discover with fanciful, flavor text.
So it is extremely fancy discover. It is the world's largest if statement. It is
Yes.
a huge, crazy script. It only pulls from the classic and basic set. So
Okay.
there's a set pool there. But if there's a big minion on the opposing side of the board, it'll get you either a removal spell or a silence spell
Okay.
or a mind control. If you play this with no mana left over, it'll get you an on curve play for your next turn, or maybe a backstab or some other 0 mana spell. If your opponent is at 6, it will get you a fireball. If your opponent is at 10 and you are on 9 mana, it will get you a pyroblast for next turn. It's it reads the game state based on certain conditions. Like if your opponent is a full board, it can get you a Frost Nova.
And
Depends on
is
how
it
clever he is,
okay? Sure. Yeah.
because a large nested if statement. The card has seen some bugs over time where like you want something and you realize you want something and then it doesn't happen. But
Hmm.
there are a lot of other times where it discovers a card and you're like, wait, why is it showing me this card? Oh, I have lethal.
I
That comes
sure.
up a lot where you see the Bloodlust or the Savage Roar.
Yeah. Yeah. And okay, that is very, very interesting then. And so does it just generate a card for you automatically, or does it give you like one of three to choose
You have
from?
3 choices.
Okay.
It'll pop up. Also, if you play it on turn 2, it will always give you Wild Growth, Animal Companion, and I forget what the third one is. There's a third one that it always shows you. but you
Okay,
usually take Wild Growth or Animal
gotcha.
Companion.
Yeah, and so and it most discover effects when I was playing meant that you were restricted to the class when you were doing the discover, right? Is this not the case for this guy?
It is not the case. It is any card in Classic or Basic. So you can get Edwin Van Cleef if you're not a rogue and you played a bunch of spells that turn. You can get Fireball if you're a priest. It is not restricted to your class. It is restricted only to the Classic and Basic set. But anything in that set is fair game. If you want a Grom Hellscream, you go get a Grom Hellscream or a Tyrion. He loves Tyrion. He'll get you Tyrion all the time.
Man, okay, so all that talk aside, so the first card was on the good to bad or good to great range or broken range. Second card was on the bad to good range. This is either broken or bad. Like it's just cutting out the middle. So
Yeah. Well, we got to look at the text too.
yeah,
If your deck has no duplicates, so
that's
you
true.
did play Reno decks
Yes,
when
for
you were
sure.
back in the game. It's Highlander. You may know that there can only be one,
Yes, yeah.
where you can only have one copy of each of any card. Now, it doesn't mean your deck doesn't have to start with no duplicates. This
Yes.
has to have no duplicates when you play this.
And I think that's the other question too, right? Is this something that you play on curve, or is this something that you play on like turn 6 and you kind of set up a board state to get the card that you want from another class to get your OTK to work, right? That's like the idea for me. Either one, the nested if statement is bad and it just like is not consistent enough for you to want to play this, or there's decks are able to find some combos saying, you know what, if I have these 3 cards in my hand and this much mana, I can play this, I'll get the card I need, and then I can do my combo play and win the turn, right? So I just know that previously cards that could cross the class boundaries could sometimes be broken because when making those cards, those aren't taken into balance for it. And that's kind of the thing for Dragon Ball Super. When you can unexpectedly, if you have something that costs 4, but there's a new card that can bring it out for 2, that could just ruin the balance of the card because when originally designed, it was never thought to come out at only half the cost. So,
And you can generally assume expected functionality in most circumstances.
Mhm,
It usually does what you want it to do. You have to coax Zephrys
mhm,
sometimes.
mhm,
Like a lot of the times, if you really want, a fireball, you
mhm.
have to play down where you play him with 4 mana left,
Mhm.
so that he knows to look for 4 mana cards.
Gotcha.
Or like if you want, you have to guide him sometimes.
Mhm.
You can generally assume he works to get the thing that you want him to get.
Okay,
Generally.
then you said this last time, and I think this is definitely, in the very least, this is a sweet card that people want to make to go work. But if I was to go, I would say it's broken. Maybe not even broken in the sense that it was too good, but once, as you hinted at, they had to fix it because it's such a complex card. But regardless of that, I would say that this was too good. 2 mana for something that can find your win condition, and maybe two mana in a combo deck is nothing. So I would say this is a broken card, and that is my final answer.
Let's click it through.
All right, let's click it through.
Final answer, he's good.
He's good. Okay.
So they had to nudge the functionality
Yeah.
because players would play him and like they would be looking for secret removal. The secret
Hmm.
would stay in play, or they'd be looking for weapon removal and they wouldn't find the weapon removal. Like
Hmm.
just making sure that he knew what he was supposed to be looking for. There was a brief period where he didn't know how to silence doomsayers, so they had to code in an exception for doomsayers. But
Sure.
it was the downside of Highlander was not without its flaws, though, as you can see from our friend Dragon Queen Alex Draws on the screen, they printed a lot of really powerful
Yeah.
Highlander support.
Hmm.
That card is crazy, by the way. They had to
Yes.
nerf her.
Yes.
If your deck has no duplicates, add 2 other random dragons to your hand. They cost 0. That's a board in a box.
Yeah. That
So
seems very good.
yeah, they nerfed that to 1 mana on the dragons. So
Okay, and
because
they
it
they
was
still
you would
cost
just
9,
slam
right?
3 dragons.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, she still cost 9, but you would play her and then just slam out 2 other dragons right away, and it
Hmm.
was a
Hmm.
lot. So Zephrys was there weren't that many combos that used him. There were a couple that really tried to find Wind Fury, the card, 2
Hmm.
mana, let a minion attack twice,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
very few. Usually it was a really flexible answer that also sometimes would find you burn or sometimes would find you threat. It just kinda did everything.
Hmm.
It just kinda did a lot of stuff.
So
So having that flexibility made it worth running. And there were some decks that weren't even Highlander, but they drew enough that they wanted this in their deck so that when they got lower in the deck, they would have access.
And so, yeah, something that this game does too, which would be literally impossible for like a physical card game, is that not only can you play these cards that say that you have no duplicates, but it, the card has a hover around it, or like a UI element that says, okay, this will have its added effect when you play it because we know that there's no duplicates in there.
Correct, yeah, so it would have that yellow glow back in the day. Back in our day, Eggman,
Yeah.
when Reno was first printed, he didn't have that.
No,
They had
no.
to add it.
No, and I specifically remember Ben Brode saying something like, "Man, that would be a lot of work to do." And then like a couple months later, it's like, "Okay, we did it. It was a lot of work, but we did it. So be happy."
It was the right thing to do too,
Yeah.
because like there was this weird meta where if you were a Reno deck and you had a duplicate deck, you would just play it anyways because the animation still played, and you would hope your opponent conceded. That
Yes.
just wasn't. You don't want that to be a part of your game. So Zephrys, he was usually played in Highlander decks. It was often correct to play him on 2 for the wild growth in Highlander Mage, because Mage doesn't get to ramp, and then you would wild growth,
Yeah.
and that would be fine. Or you could just fire him off in Highlander Hunter decks and just get your animal companion every time on turn 3. He was really flexible and really interesting for a while, but there were people that would make the argument that he was broken, and the concerns that you had about the cross-class thing did come up a lot in the discourse at the time. Of people were getting sick of the class boundaries being violated,
Yeah.
of playing against Fireball from all, 9
Yeah.
or 10 classes.
Yeah.
So he was never nerfed, though he did kind of get dumber over time as more cards got introduced into Standard. They had to keep fixing him. Then they shipped him off to Wild. Basic and Classic doesn't exist anymore, so his card pool has stayed static, and he has gotten much dumber in Wild, but still usually worth playing. But in Standard, he was meta defining the entire time he was around, but never nerfed. So I'm going to say good.
Okay,
You
and
could
so
make an argument for broken.
So I would say, just to wrap it up, assuming that Highlander decks are still existing, this would be a card that you would just, once again, be putting into your Highlander deck, but not necessarily the reason why you are making the Highlander deck.
For the most part, there were some rogues that actually went Highlander just for him.
Okay.
But they also really liked getting DQA, the Dairy Queen over there, when she was printed one expansion later.
Okay.
But it's outside of that particular scenario, yeah, usually you would have some other reason to pull you into Highlander.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I think we're 2-1, so doing okay. Let's go to this next card we've got here. So Wildpaw Knoll. It has Rush, which is charge for just attacking other minions. Costs 1 less for each card you've added to your hand from another class. So this is a rogue card. 5. All right. So I forgot the name of it, but the
Burgle.
Burgling. No, it's the worm, right? There was a worm that like cost 7, and then every time like
Corridor Creeper is what you're thinking of.
Yeah, it was.
I was thinking of the mechanic, but you're thinking of the broken 0 mana card.
Yeah, because that card, it got announced. It was a 5/5, and a 7 cost 5/5, and they're like, oh, it's just going to sit in your hand, or you're going to just draw it onto like turn 5, and then you'll never be able to play it. It's a bad card. Don't craft it. And then like they nerfed it in like 2 months afterwards, right? Because it was too good. Because they made it a 2/5, right? Something like that. Like
in Corridor Creeper, people misread it because you would normally think it's when my stuff dies while this is in my hand, but it was when both players' stuff died, which was very different. Very, very different. And yeah, Corridor Creeper was insane because it was just a 0 mana 5/5 that came down really, really fast.
All right. Well, in the same logic, so it's a 4/5, which is, once again, pretty much good stats. And the fact that it has Rush. I don't think the Corridor Creeper had Rush. It was just a big body, right?
Did not. Rush didn't exist yet.
And I guess it just depends on how often. I mean, it's the identity of Rogue to steal cards from other classes, right? Which also makes it a pain to to do anything for, or just balance it correctly. I mean, it sucks in the Rogue mirror, unless
it does.
Unless they're, I mean, I think I can't remember it. I know some specific cards it just said another class instead of your opponent's class. I don't know if they've changed that or if they've changed the philosophy.
So they've moved more towards that because of the rogue mirror situation.
Mm-hmm.
Like you remember Swashbuckler from back when you were playing, the
Yes.
1 mana 1/1 rogue pirate
Yeah.
that would borrow from your opponent's class. It now does another random class.
Okay. Cool.
And it is actually back in standard currently.
Oh, cool. Okay. I thought that was a really good identity card for the class. So that's cool that
Yep,
it's moved
they agreed
there.
with you. They brought it
Yeah.
back for a year.
Yeah. All right. All right. If it said, cost 1 less for each card you've cast or played from another class, I'd say this is trash because that's way too much work. But it really just depends on how easy it is to steal cards. And I think a lot of the cards that Rogue play, at least when I played, stealing a card was kind of like the advantage to playing it. Like you would play a card and it would circumstantially steal a card, or like there was was it Burgle 3 cost, steal 2 from your opponent's class, stuff like that. So you get to draw 2, and then this becomes a 3 cost 4/5 with rush, which seems good. All right, so I'm in the good to broken camp, and it really just depends on was it fine for its stats, or was it too? It really is. Is it too easy for this to cost 0? That's really like the game that we play for broken cards, right? We saw a 0 card or 0 cost card that was broken. How easy is this to become a 0? And if it's too easy, then it's broken, and if it's just fine, then if it's not too often. I'm going to say this card's broken. I know I said the last card's broken too, but broken's my final call for this one.
Roll the tape. Unbelievably broken.
Good.
Incredibly broken. They had to double nerf it. So look at that card in the right. Look at that card in the right.
Okay. Oh, okay. I've heard some. So I got Twitter for Hearthstone like 6 years ago, which means even though with no other reasons, most of the people I still follow are Hearthstone players, right? So every once in a while I'll see on my feed, I'll see things, and I do know this card, so I'm happy it's a side card. That seems incredibly obnoxious to deal with. Like just like it's fun as a rogue player, but it seems like an obnoxious card, which is cool. But yeah, if so, what is the keep going to talk about how this card works?
Okay, so Wildpaw Knoll costs 1 less for each card you've added to your hand from another class. Maestra of the Masquerade, a 2-mana 3/2 legendary from the previous expansion. You start the game as a different class until you play a rogue card.
Mm-hmm.
That means all of the rogue cards that you draw before you take off the mask make Wildpaw Knoll cheaper. There was also a new mechanic in the same set Maester was in called Tradable, where you pay 1 mana and you hover the card over your deck.
Okay.
And you put it back in the deck and you draw a new card. It's not playing a spell. It's an alternate. It's a word on cards that are you normally play.
Yep.
It's an other thing you can do with it. It doesn't count as playing a spell or playing the card, so you don't take the mask off. So you would tradable on turn 1. Because you draw your first card, Knoll goes to 4.
Yep.
You tradable, it goes to 3. On turn 2, you have a 2-mana 4/5 rush. In addition, there is a super weird, super crazy card called Secret Passage. You see that in the left side of the screen.
Yeah, I do see
I
that.
am guessing that you read that card and you're like, does this really do what I think it does?
Yeah,
It's a very powerful card.
It seems like a lot of card draw for not a lot of cost.
Yeah, that used to do 5, by the way, 5 cards. They nerfed it to 4. Insane. So it's a little more awkward than it looks. 1 mana, replace your hand with 4 cards from your deck at the end of the turn, swap back. So anything that's in your hand currently, you don't get access to it this turn. You can play it before. And then you passage, put your hand away. It zoops off to the side. There's a long animation. It all goes into passage.
Yep.
And then you get the cards from your deck. So if you Maestra is an after effect. So if you play passage on 1 and hit 4 rogue cards and 1's a Knoll, that's a 0 mana turn 1 4/5 rush. You just toss it right down there.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that is super gross.
It wasn't usually the right thing to do to passage on 1, but if you needed to, if you were against a face hunter or whatever, you just fired it off there because if the Wildpaw Knoll effect counts for the entire game. So even if you didn't passage into a Knoll, when the original cards went back to your hand, they counted again for Knoll. And so if you had a Knoll in your opening hand, they were now 0 mana for the rest of the game.
Gotcha.
And then you would Shadow Step them, they would stay 0 mana. Yeah.
I definitely lucked out a little bit then too, because I was thinking of, once again, it had to be in hand to see these other cards. If it's strictly just if it's just like a passive thing for the game, then oh my gosh, yeah, I could see how that could easily be snowball. So how was it nerfed twice then? Like you said.
So it was a 5 mana 4/5. It is now a 6 mana 3/5.
Okay. So
And
they
the card is not the deck is not good anymore.
okay.
And the cards because the problem at 5 mana, there were decks that didn't run any Burgle cards
Hmm.
that just played a bunch of tradables and then would just make this cheaper and take the mask off.
Gotcha.
And so they would just have a 2 mana 4/5 rush in their deck the whole game just because they wanted to not die to minions, but they could just throw in Maester on 2 Knolls and the deck was good.
Hmm.
Now at 6, it's a really big difference. You have to wait one more turn before masking off. And if
Hmm.
you can't play any other rogue cards, it's not worth doing. And then the Thief Rogue deck that actually plays a bunch of Burgles was really dependent on the speed of the Knolls along with another nerf that they did to their hero card. Um, it was really dependent on making sure that this came down quickly to snowball the board and kill the opponent and trade effectively. And so the one attack and the one cost were both really relevant there. So
Gotcha.
the deck can no longer really compete on board as quickly, which means there's not really any reason to play it.
Unless you hard went into like a Burgle kind of archetype, right? Which I'm guessing is not as great right now.
So the Thief Rogue deck that was really good, it had a bunch of really efficient cards that added non-rogue cards to your hand.
Hmm.
But the Knoll as the payoff was the important part, and the payoff is so much worse now. It's a turn slower and doesn't trade as well.
Hmm.
Like 4 attack versus 3 attack is a big deal, and waiting an extra turn to do 1 less damage is it's proven to be too big of a cross for the deck to bear right now. Maybe post rotation, but as of right now, the engine doesn't really do as much anymore, which
Gotcha.
we're thankful for because it was pretty form at warping. You probably saw I had a couple tweets about this right after the nerf came through, and the
I
0 mana
specifically
4/5
know
rush. Yeah,
Maestra was yeah. It sounds like yeah.
yeah.
It seems really cool, and I understand like it fits the theme of Rogue, and I'm a big geek when it comes to cards fitting the theming, even though it mechanically doesn't need to. And so it sounds like something a rogue would do, and rogues are obnoxious. So, but yeah, this seems a little bit too obnoxious to stay in standard.
Yeah. Though it's Maester, I'll point out, she's not good enough without Knoll,
Hmm.
and Knoll's not really good enough without Maester. Maester was out for an entire expansion before. Total meme card. That
Okay,
like just throwing a Bloodfin Raptor in your deck, a random 2 mana 3/2, just to throw off your opponent in the mulligan, wasn't worth it.
gotcha.
So, and she's not seeing any play right now either. When it was the best thing to do in standard, super annoying.
Hmm.
Because the best way to know if your opponent was a rogue was if they were playing one of the really bad classes. If you queued into a priest or a warrior, you knew it was a rogue.
Oh
It
yeah,
became tricky when you were against mages and druids. Like they could actually be mage and druid. You didn't
hmm
know.
And you can still do the hero power of the class you're pretending to be, right?
Correct.
Mm,
So it'd be really funky. Like you'd see druids trading the cutlass on 1 and then hero powering on 2. It was a very strange time.
yeah, yeah. All right. Well, then let's. I think what we're 3-1 right now. We're a little bit halfway through, and
You're,
let's go to card number 5.
you're doing very well.
Oh
All
man,
right. This is a
Quest.
quest. So you remember Quest from
I
Angora.
do.
They've come back twice now. This is from the second time. The third time is currently in standard. This is from the second time in Saviors of Uldum, where all those quests, the payoff was to replace your hero power with a new one.
Hmm.
So this is the Priest quest. Restore 15 health total. Can be to minions, can be to heroes, whatever. You just have to hit that number 15. Your reward is the Obelisk's Eye, the hero power. It restores 3 health instead of 2. But if you target a minion in addition to the healing, give it a permanent +3/+3.
Okay. So, and if I remember how quests work, so quests are you can only run one. I guess classes only had one when they were out, so you could only run one anyways. But it would guarantee to be in your opening hand. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep.
Okay.
It is always on the far left side of your turn 1 hand.
Okay. So here's the. This has always been like the trickiest thing about priest is that its hero power is either like busted or does nothing, right? Because healing 2 can do a lot, but if you're not damaged, then it does nothing, right? And if your opponent sees that, okay, you have this activate the obelisk going, maybe I can do damage and I can give you ways to heal, but there's that. What's the priest does have a 0 mana card though, that heals
Circle of Healing.
circle of is that still in standard in whatnot, or is that's
It
over?
was when this was.
Okay, okay.
So when this was around 0 mana heal 4 to all minions, or I think it was actually, yeah, it was all
All
minions.
minions, yeah, yeah. So
Yep.
you could cheese it with like Wild Pyromancer, right? If you have like 3 or 4 bodies on board, you activate a spell, deal 1 damage to everything, circle healing, get everything back. But that's like a really old combo. I know an old reliable combo, but 15 seems like a lot. The hero power is obviously great. Like, I don't think it's broken. I don't know. Like, it really just depends, I guess, on how many incidental healing cards do you have? How many cards do you have that, on top of being like minions, do you have that are just like a good stat line that coincidentally like heal you for a little bit, or like do some healing shenanigans, right? Because paying 2 from your hero power to heal yourself for 2 is just like what, not even a seventh of the way there. So like having to spend that much mana, like having to spend 15 mana based on just your hero power is not very efficient.
Yeah, you'd need some kind of additional healing. I believe Injured Blade Master and Northshire Cleric were still around at the time of this, when this
Okay.
card was around as well.
Okay.
Which are, again, very old school classic
Yes.
combos that have been around forever.
Yeah, and I, based on how you're saying, and I'm not surprised, it seems like they've been rotated out just because. Yeah, those just seem like when I was playing Priest, like half your deck were just staples, and then you kind of build your board after that. Like there are so many cards that they couldn't make better because it made Priest too good. So, all right, I'm on the bad to good range. I don't think it's broken. I think it's. I'm going to say it's bad. I'm going to say it's a bad card. 15 seems like too big of a thing, and it's something that your opponent can kind of play around. And for you to do it, on curve, you kind of have to have your opponent cooperate with you to do it. Or there's just some busted combo for you to heal 15 in 1 turn and you can get it off. But I'm going to say bad. And so
The
we're
winner
going to see.
is.
All right. And also, I think someone. It is bad. Real quick. This is my streaming setup, and it has. I think someone followed me on my Twitch channel, and so it did the little alert box. So very
That's
professional setup. So this
Yeah,
video
I didn't
goes
see it
out
on
to
my
you.
end.
Okay, I heard the sound. Anyways, okay,
Yes.
keep going.
So you were correct in that it was awkward to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
The deck was loaded up with self-damaging minions,
Mm-hmm.
but also the reward was worse than it seemed. You would just make some big idiot, and then they would deal with it however they dealt with how big idiots, because every deck in standard had to be able to do that if they were going that long.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, it was annoying, and you could make some random large minion and just make it bigger and bigger over time, but it's still hero power to get there.
Mm-hmm.
It was not enough of a payoff and too much of a cost.
Okay.
So people were hyped around it. They were like, "Oh yeah, Priest can fight for the board now." Can it? Can it really? Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd
Though
say what would you think the number, and if it wasn't 15, what would you think the number would be for it to be good but not broken?
you'd probably aim for 10-ish. Like, I
Okay.
think you could aim for 10 and probably be okay. But in this same expansion, there was a very powerful combo priest deck that was built around Northshire, Wild Pyro, Circle of Healing, and all that. But it used Divine Spirit and Inner Fire to just kill you.
Okay.
Didn't do any of this stuff. It just killed you, which that's a combo that you know pretty well. But the draw was there and the support tools were there.
Mm-hmm.
So combo priest, has had its ups and downs over the years. That was the reason why these cards got rotated, because they printed efficient, inexpensive minions
Yeah.
to really facilitate the process.
Yeah, and so is Wild Pyromancer still in Classic or Standard?
Nope.
Okay.
Rotated him too.
Okay, cool. That makes sense. I mean, I think there is a thing to say. Like, obviously, there's some cards that are known for the game, but at some time too, you eventually want, if you can't find a card that can meet the same mana, but not super overpace it or super underpace it, you kind of have to rotate it out for new cards.
Well, and there are a lot of really distinctive cards that you remember. You're recalling a lot of these cards from 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
They were game defining, right? And so if you want to explore what your game looks like without those cards, you can get some really interesting situations. You can print other stuff
Mm-hmm.
that you couldn't print before. With Wild Pyro and Standard, you always have to be careful of cheap buff spells, cheap divine shields,
Mm-hmm.
equality effects, because you're always setting up these giant board clears. And so they were able to print a lot of other interesting cards that are pyro adjacent or
Sure.
class specific
Hmm.
by getting rid of this neutral that had been around for 7 years.
Yeah.
So he might be back later, but they have experimented with some of these old sacred cows,
Hmm.
trying something new. And the new core set that's replacing classic, they gave it to everyone for free.
Okay.
So you don't
Cool.
have to worry about collecting the
Nice.
cards.
Oh, that's really cool too. So yeah, I think that I as someone who plays card games like I do, I always think that the emphasis needs to be on. I mean, there's always the money, right? There's always money, but for the sake of the game, I'm okay with cards rotating, even if they're cards that I own and they lose value. I do kind of put more emphasis on having a balanced game with new cards and fun interaction instead of just playing the same card for literally 7 years. So I think that's a cool idea if done properly.
Yep. And non-rotating formats get crazy powerful over time, and
Hmm.
that's just not it's not a fixable problem without rotation. So if you want to curate, you got to rotate, and I'm happy with how they're doing it.
Well, let's go to, I think this is our sixth card, if that's correct.
It is.
Okay. Oh, good old, we're talking about the card that's been around forever. We got good old True Silver Champion over there. So this is
Yep.
Lightforged Zealot, a rare battle cry. If your deck has no neutral cards, equip a 4/2 True Silver Champion. Man, Hearthstone still has those consistency issues with that 4 overlapping on that 4. That bugs me a lot.
Well,
Broken.
I
Fix
to
the
make sure
text.
all the cards look the same, I mock them up in a custom card creator. It looks better in the game.
Okay,
This is
okay.
this is me. It's not the game. It looks nice. I promise.
Okay. So if your deck has no neutral cards, equip a 4. So this means that you have to be okay. True Silver on 4 was still somewhat good when I was leaving the game. Being able to essentially do 8 damage for 4 over 2 turns was good. Normally it meant that it could pretty much KO anything that was played on turn 3 on your opponent's turn. So if you needed to get rid of something, this was the way to do it. And it had like the utility of being some heal, and paladins like using weapons sometimes. So True Silver is True Silver still in standard rotation, or has it been rotated out?
I believe it is currently. Yes, it is currently in standard.
Okay. And then we have this card. So this would be where the disconnect came from me, where one, I like having a four mana 4/2 that makes a 4 mana 4/2 weapon is cool. Just like number wise, it makes sense. Like, oh look, it's like theme wise, it's everything's there. And so I think this was the idea for them. And so they're like, all right, we want to have a 4 mana 4/2 that makes a 4 mana 4/2. So what is the restriction to make it balanced to where people will play it, but it's not broken? And so the having no neutral cards is probably one of the heaviest deck restrictions that I've seen. That is not like the odd and even, right? I don't know if the odd and even decks still exist. That was asking for a lot. Highlander decks were out of your way, but most, depending on what part of the season there are and how many cards in the card pool, that was either very easy or very difficult. But I would say very few times would I be like, you know what, let's make an entire deck with only paladin cards. I'd always feel like when I left the game, there are always some neutral, legendaries or neutral minions that you'd want to run to try to get that.
Wild Pyromancer.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like with not consecration, quality.
Equality.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 2 card board clear, easy, and so it really just depends on are there enough paladin cards that exist to make this viable and to make the idea around this deck. And I guess the other thing, are there more cards like this that have the same condition? If there are like 3, like obviously it's above stats and effects for its mana cost, and you have to look around the deck construction element for it. So if there are enough cards to help piggyback this as well, and this was just, if the deck was comparable, I could see this being, very, very good. And then if it was too difficult to do that, and you had to kind of scrounge for the cards to get that all paladin deck, then it's a very cool card that just didn't have a deck that to live in. So Yeah, this is really tough. I think I'm on the good to broken side. I don't think I've also lost track on how many I've said, how many have been good, bad, or broken, so I can't metagame this either. Not that I would.
Gamer's gonna game.
Gamers, yeah,
I'm
I
not here
get
to
it.
judge.
I get it. Yeah. All right, I'm going to say this card is good, and only on the fact that I can't think in my 4 years of playing Hearthstone, or how I probably played longer since the 4 years. I can't think of a deck that only uses class cards. So if this card is broken, it would have to there would have to be a really comparable deck that this just makes turns 4 very, very ugly to go against. So that is my answer. Let's see what we got.
Yep. It's a good card.
Okay.
It is a good card. The set that it was in had one other payoff. Lightforged Crusader was a 7-mana 7/7 that added 5 random Paladin cards to your hand. It was okay.
Okay.
This was the reason to play the deck.
Okay.
Right? This was the good one.
Okay.
Because you're right, you play this on curve or you coin it out on 3. That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And you use the True Silver if you need to defend the body so you can connect for 8 next turn.
Yeah.
It was powerful. Pure Paladin was what it was called. Exclusively Paladin cards. And it was big dumb idiots every turn. A lot of fun. Not a ton of nuance to the deck, but like you would just play a lot of stats and have a lot of buffs. You know, you would miss your Wildpaw Romancers and a couple other cards that end up getting printed. But there was enough depth in Paladin where you were able to do this, and it was all right. It was pretty good.
Okay, cool. Okay, so you can correct me. So it is, I'm gonna guess, still incredibly rare, or only this deck where you do not have any neutral cards, right? Where did every class kind of get a card like this and with varying success?
So there was no restriction on it. It's Wildpaw Knoll. That was like in that deck, you needed the cards to be rogue and not neutral to discount your Knolls because it was only class cards. So that deck usually played 28 or 29 neutrals or rogue cards.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
And there have been some mage decks that are really spell heavy. There has been a deck in standard for past year that is exclusively spells.
Okay.
So it's 30 mage cards.
Yeah.
But it's not by design of needing no neutrals. It's just how it is.
Gotcha.
But Paladin was the only one that got the pure Paladin payoffs. There were 2 in that set. There was another one the following year, where it's an 8-mana 7/5, where it gained Rush, Divine Shield, Taunt, and I think Rush, Divine Shield, and Taunt if you were pure. So like that went in the deck, but now it's in standard as the only pure Paladin card, and nobody plays pure Paladin.
Yeah, I could see like this was on 4. This seems like a lot, and I forget, coin is definitely a thing where if you can cheat this out a turn early, you are sitting very, very pretty.
Yep. We should explain the coin. For any listeners that don't know what the coin is, if you go second in this game, you get a 0-mana spell that gains you 1 mana 1 time only to mitigate the downside of going second, and you draw an extra card. And even then, it's still 50-50 because Hearthstone's such a tempo-focused game.
Yeah, and you don't get to decide if you're going first or second. You just literally, as when I last played it at least, you just boot up
Correct.
the game and it tells you if you're going first or second.
Yep, just random choice.
Yeah,
coin flip.
Yeah, which in other
and the
card
loser
games,
gets to keep the coin.
Yeah, gets to keep the coin. And in other card games that I play, some decks are, if you were to choose, you would choose one or the other, not necessarily going first, not necessarily going second all the time. Some decks are really good going second. Some decks are really good going first. And so having a true 50-50 makes kind of it more interesting in this game, I'd say.
I think so. It streamlines the process.
Yeah. All right. And I think we've got one last card. Oh, another Demon Hunter card. Ugh.
Yep. And this one I added at the last minute because I wanted something tricky. And I'm glad I did because you were crushing me. You were 5-1 going into this last card. So we've got Glide, a 4-mana spell. Shuffle your hand into your deck. Draw 4 cards. Now, Outcast. That means if this card is far left or far right, then your opponent also shuffles their whole hand into the deck and then draws 4.
All right, so a lot of just going in on this one, and I will say I won't give myself a pat on the back for doing well because unlike you, I've actually played this game before, and for like many years. Obviously, when you're doing Digimon cards and hopefully Dragon Ball Super cards next, will these are completely new card games that you've not played. So I've got an edge for this, but oh man, this is a cool card, but man, there's just so much disruption for this, and I don't know. So something else with Outcast is that you don't get to choose the placement of your cards. Every time you get a new card, it goes to the far right, correct? And so
Correct.
if this is something it's saying either one, you have to play it the turn you draw it, or like every new card you draw, or if you get in your opening hand, you play all your tiny dudes first and kind of go from there. So it's making me uncomfortable. So obviously the thing is that this could be literally the only card in your hand, and then you play it, and then you +3, right? Additionally, depending on what your opponent's doing, you could, your opponent can have like 10 cards in hand, and then you just sufficiently made them discard 6. Even if it wasn't even if it said something like your opponent draws the same amount of cards they put back, that is still sufficient disruption in a card game like this, because how I remember playing Hearthstone is that you have there's nothing truly reactive. It's more of a back and forth, because you can't play anything on your opponent's turn. You say, all right, I have this card that I want to play, and so if they play X card, next turn I will play Y card to get rid of it, right? That's the gameplay. And so if you play Glide and say, all right, your card's gone, so I'm free to play my card after that. Okay, 4 cost is expensive though. That is my only thing for that. Like it looks like it's disruption, and looking at the other card too, that Demon Hunter seems to be more aggressive than control heavy. This kind of mana to not actually do anything on the board, but more of hopefully give your opponent less options, seems kind of good. And
Demon Hunter is big on, they have wide minion removal, often tied with lifesteal. They have they have a small token theme with rushing tokens. A lot of focus on their character attacking, and a lot of focus on card draw.
Well, this is a fantastic final card, and especially since I think you put 2 for each, right? So there's no like there won't be. I can't metagame this too easy either.
The week this card was announced, every podcast got 30 minutes longer.
Oh, I'm
Because
sure.
even the Hearthstone players were just talking about it.
I'm looking at this now. We're talking for an hour. I can't believe it. It's crazy. Thank goodness we're only doing 7 cards, because
yeah,
I have so much time in the day. Boy. All right, I'll say confidently that I'm not confident in any of these. I would say this is. I'd have to definitely, if I maybe play the archetype or the leader for it, I'd probably have a better idea for it. But I will say this card is good. That is what I'm saying, which is just it's a cowardly neutral answer. I would say that people were probably theory crafting that this card was busted or it was too expensive. People would play it, and sometimes it would work out. I don't know how consistently you can depend on the Outcast, because it seems a little clunky sometimes. But drawing 4 cards for 4, if you're playing really aggressively to refresh your hand without the Outcast, seems fine. I mean, what Arcane Intellect is 3 mana, draw 2, right? Which is saw some play. So this is kind of the same thing. What was the Paladin card that you draw as many cards as your opponent has, right?
Divine Favor, 3 mana, draw up to your opponent's hand size.
And that card sees play. Best case, 4 mana, draw 4.
That card gone. Yeah. That card long gone.
Yeah, thank goodness. Yeah, good. Good is my thing. So let's see what it is.
It is good now, when printed, you went through the what you verbalized was the same thing everyone went through
Yeah.
of either this is busted, throw it in a super low cost deck, play it on 4, get rid of your opponent's hand, draw a bunch of cards, or this is expensive and awkward. It turns out that in the same set this was printed in, there was another card called Voracious Reader. You remember Jeeves, the 4-mana 1/4 that drew both players up to 3 cards at the end of their turn if they had less than 3.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
butler, right? Jeeves. Is
Yep.
that okay? Yeah.
Yep. So there was a card called Voracious Reader. It was a 2-mana 1/3 in the same set that said if you only have less than 3 cards at the end of your turn, you draw up to 3. That turned out to be a much more efficient draw engine for Demon Hunter, and also Skull of Gul'dan, as we saw on the first slide, still very powerful.
Yeah.
So Glide didn't see play for about a year.
Okay.
And then they printed some cards to help it out. So they printed Double Jump, which is 1 mana draw an outcast card. So you would be able to find this and put it on the right side of your hand.
Okay.
They printed Illidari Studies, where you discover an outcast card. Your next outcast card costs 1 less. Puts this in the right side of your hand if you discover it. So you would find it.
Yep.
But the most important cards are the Demon Hunter quest line, because now quests in the third return, the third iteration, they're 3-parters. You do the first part, then the second part, then the third part. And the quest line cared about drawing a set number of cards in 1 turn, and the reward was to reduce the cards that you drew by a certain number of mana. So draw 4 cards, then 5 cards, then 6 cards.
Yep.
You know what helps you draw a bunch of cards in 1 turn is Glide.
Yes.
And the payoff, if you look on the left side, Irebound Brute, it's an 8 mana 7/8 taunt. It costs, or 8 mana 6/7 taunt. It costs 1 less for each card drawn this turn.
Gotcha.
It used to cost 7.
Okay.
So you would show down on 1. You would play a couple cards. You would glide into a couple brutes. You would cycle other cards. You would play a bunch of stuff. It still serves a role in current standard, mostly as a disruption card. It's less proactive, but now reactive decks want to use this to disrupt their opponent's combo hand, and while progressing their own quest.
Yeah, and it got like the analog for this was like Dirty Rat, right? Like, which was such a funny card to me,
Yeah.
and where it was a 2/6 taunt, and the bad thing about it was that it played a card from your opponent's hand to maybe play a 9 cost for free on turn 2, and you're in a bad luck, right? But just the idea of saying that card your opponent's banking on playing next turn, they literally can't anymore, and that seems like that seems good enough to at least consider. But I think, from what I'm hearing and what you said, it wasn't good immediately, but they kind of made its support around it to make it good eventually.
Yes, they built around it, and also the format just kind of got to the point where people had a bunch of cards in hand they were waiting to play, and so you're able to ship them back to the deck, and that was really, really useful.
Yeah.
So that is the part that matters now. Last expansion, you got to use it both proactively and defensively, so it was quite good. And the entire year before that, it was poo. It was not very good.
And is this
So
in
it's been
standard
interesting to see
for Demon Hunter?
yeah, this
Okay.
is in standard for another couple months.
Okay, cool. Yeah, did this come out in a set, or is this like a baseline Demon Hunter? Because I'm not immediately seeing something behind, like the emblem.
So Glide, I mocked all these up in a custom card creator, so you wouldn't be able to tell which ones were nerfed or not.
Okay.
But Glide came out in Scholomance, which was the middle set last year. That's rotating in March or April of this year.
Gotcha.
But the cards on the outside, Showdown and Irebound Brute, those are from United and Stormwind, which was the middle set this year.
Okay.
Came out about 6 months ago.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Well, cool. Yeah, this one, I once again, I think this is a really good last card for the day. I would have put money on any of them if pressured. It seems it could have been any one of the 3.
It was very hard to predict as a very dedicated, engaged Hearthstone player. And so, like, when we first saw it before we knew the context of the rest of the set it was coming out, and we were like, this card is crazy. But then it turned out to not even be all that good because they printed so much other really powerful draw that expansion. That's kind of been a theme lately. They're pulling back on it.
Yeah.
A little bit. But yeah, you went 6-1 in a narrow miss on Zephrys.
Yeah, and that
I'm
one,
very impressed.
Very
good. That was our 2-mana 3/2 buddy.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
Yeah.
I wished he was broken, so I did not get the card that I
There
wanted.
were some people that would absolutely agree with you.
Yeah.
that would have said what he did shouldn't happen. They never nerfed him, they never changed him, and he was solid card. In some cases, felt like he was out of bounds,
Hmm.
but he would find you answers. But it wasn't like some of the other broken cards we've seen, where it's just like it makes the game over. That
Hmm.
was never really what he was about.
Yeah, but I would say once again, I love a good theming, and being able to take advantage of the things that your card game is that other cards aren't able to do. I think is something that you definitely need to capitalize. And I can't think of any other card game that that could put the term, in the effects, wish for the perfect card. Like even in Dragon Ball, where you actually have wishes, wish for the perfect card will probably not exist in that card game ever.
Yeah, in any paper card game, you can't do this. In any digital card game, you have to have the bravery to just. Hearthstone is big at we put a sentence on the card, just play it and figure it out. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
And they let you. What I really wanted to showcase with the cards that we put here is all the clever mechanics that have been in the game since you've been gone.
Yes.
Because there are a lot of really interesting things that have happened the past few years.
Yeah, and I'm definitely. It's gonna probably take like an hour for like all the like stuff I've missed and like maybe free packs I've gotten in like the last couple of years with my account just to boot it up. But yeah, I've definitely obviously I played this game for so long. There's some nostalgia for that too, and I haven't played the Battlegrounds part of it either, which I know a lot of people are only playing Hearthstone for that now too. But yeah, it is a there are a lot of good memories and obviously a lot of great people I met with the card game. That's really really cool.
Yeah. And your memory still serves you well. So
Yes.
maybe we can get you to log in one of these days, try out some Demon Hunter.
Yeah,
Press
we'll
the button.
see. Yeah. Anyways, that will be once again. I think our first episode was like 30-40 minutes. This is a full hour now. So if you've got this far, congratulations to you as well. You've performed greatly. Thank you for helping my analytics as well. But ridiculous hat, where can people find you?
The hub of my content is twitter.com/ridiculoushat. You can find all 3 of my Hearthstone podcasts. Yes, I said 3. I know it sounds crazy. Over there, The Angry Chicken, Coin Concede, Vicious Syndicate, and I tweet some stuff about sandwiches sometimes. That's what Twitter is for.
Yes,
What
for
about
sure.
you, Eggman? People know where to find you here in the YouTube channel. Where else?
We
What
also
else you up
find
to?
me on Twitter. I'm trying to get more of a presence there. I have not gone to TikTok yet. We'll see if I ever make that bridge. I feel like I'm aging too much for that. But we also have Twitch as well, where I do content as well. My digital card game client of choice right now is Master Duel. I've been cranking out some gameplay of that too. So
Oh man.
yeah.
I watched a video today of Day 9 playing it for the first time. So entertaining.
Yeah, I went through that entire thing. It is super funny, and the play match that he did. I one of the decks that he saw like the example game from, that was I knew one of the decks. I'm like, oh yeah, you just do that, and him just going like, oh my gosh, I need to turn that off. I'm getting a headache. Like it is very very crazy. So anyways, that's going to be it for us. Thank you very much for hanging out. This is a lot of fun. We'll plan to have you back for Dragon Ball Super, our 3rd episode with you for this, as long as you'll have it. And you've got, I guess, we'll double it to 2 hours next time for going this current pace. So
Oh gosh.
definitely block out some time. But thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you all next time.
Damn it.